Okay, ready or not, here we go. We all said that, right? Okay, full throttle. Good. We're learning in the discourse, those who have been following us the 2 weeks, the two types of service, the service of Torah, the service of tefillah, Torah and prayer, how these are the two types of Shoshanim, the two types of roses of the month of Elul. We're learning that our connection to God is comes in two manners. One of them is that we can fully receive the divine truth, download it to us without any compromise, and that's through Torah. The divine truth manifests without any adaptation, without any need for confirmation on our end. God comes down here and states his truth. That's through Torah. The quality of that is you get the full punch. You get the full truth. The downside is it's not necessarily digestible. In other words, we at our end don't necessarily aren't on par with that truth. So we can live side by side with the truth, but it doesn't permeate us. It's like the famous idea of when you always say that a person studied a lot of Torah and you ask, you studied a lot of Torah, but what did the Torah teach you? And that's the question. It's a lot of times the person studies Torah. The Torah is a truth, but they're not one with that truth. For that, we also need to climb the ladder of prayer. Climbing the ladder of prayer is a relative truth. It's our perception of reality, our connection to God. And that is step by step. And the point over here is that even when you reach the highest peaks of purity, the most selfless level of perception, getting to see things from utter truth can lift yourself up from all the darknesses and all the shades that we try to purposely keep, to kind of, we think will keep us safe. And we can kind of remove all of that and get to see truth as truth really is. It's still always going to be connected to the way we see it. And therefore, it can never compare to the truth of Torah. But therefore, as a result of Torah and tefillah together, prayer and Torah together, we get a perfect harmony. Because we're able to get full truth. And at the same time, we also become recipients of that truth. And the two of them merge together and create a godly human being. And we were learning in the discourse, if you remember, that these are two methods of divine assistance. Hashem gives us the prayer, and he gives us Torah. And these are two methods of his assistance and our work that we should be able to have a proper tshuva, a proper connection to him. Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I am to my beloved is to me, the month of Elul. Today we're going to learn, and this is the whole crux of the discourse, after we've been going through the concept of Torah 2 weeks ago, prayer we primarily learned last week, how it's gradual. Every day you have to go through the steps. You wake up feeling very far from God, but you make an acknowledgement. Even while you're still in your bed in your PJs, you already make an acknowledgement of God. It's a very true acknowledgement from the essence of your soul, but it's not really influencing the internal consciousness of the person. For that, of our dark selves and start allowing the divine light to shine in. So when we say Hodu is the first part, it's a submission. Remember, it's a submission. When we said the blessings of Birchat HaShachar, the daily blessings, when we say opens our eyes, it's switching on the switches of the various different powers of our soul that we can at least start to operate in a more our divine capabilities are running. We haven't yet gotten into it, but we're just starting. But at least we can. And we learned that's why the submission that we say in the beginning of davening by Hodu is a little nuanced. In God's name, in Havaya, we can only submit to. In his name, which is the name Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, which is a far mitigated level of the divine, that we can kiru, that we can call out to. We spoke about earlier. Then we move to a higher level, and we do Psuke de Zimra. Psuke de Zimra is a level which are, in the davening, in the prayers, from after Baruch Sha'amar till Yishtabach, till the blessings of the Shema. That whole part, which is all the Psalms, Ashrei, Hallelujah, all the Psalms. Over there is a meditation. It's all meditative, but it's primarily geared to create an emotional excitement. It's not meant so much to illuminate the mind. It brings you into the world of godliness in a very general manner. You don't really have a grip on it. You're just in a very general manner beginning to experience the wow. When you're just submitting to God, you're not experiencing a wow yet. It's not yet exciting the emotions. But now you're already getting excited. Now we learned last week, if you remember, just doing a little review, that the reason we don't really have a full grasp yet, we're not able to internalize it in our mind and have a sharp understanding and internalization, which comes through is because the subject matter in that part of the prayer is primarily the idea that God creates the world ex nihilo. And that concept is something that we can never perceive and never understand what's going on, how that happens. Because it's a really cool idea. If we would truly perceive our existence being created from nothing, we would really realize that even when we exist, we really are nothing, because our source is everything. And eventually, this is so crazy, the reality of that would catch up with us, and it would nullify our existence. We would then nullify ourselves out of existence through coming to that understanding. And God wants to keep us in existence, or else if we're not in existence, he doesn't have fun. So he needs us for his entertainment. So if we would be privy to the full truth and really understand our utter nothingness without him creating us from absolute nothing every moment, and if it would really dawn upon us, and if we would really understand it in a way that we can really appreciate it, then we would internalize it, and it would become our reality. So therefore, God keeps that secret outside of the human comprehension. However, it still can wow us, and it excites us. Now, we learned last week, I'm just reviewing this amazing stuff. We learned last week that it's very important because it gets rid of the clutter. The point of getting excited during this part of davening is because we have so much junk mail that sits in our consciousness from all the stuff that we do just very, very casually. From the words that we speak, conversations we have, surfing of the line online that we watch. See, he's not even talking about those days. The Rebbe wasn't even talking, because the Rebbe is talking before all this existed. The amount of shtus intake that an average person takes in, shtus means absolute stupidity today, the garbage. We're like garbage collectors. We're literally like a trash, like those big trucks over there picking up the garbage. Like everybody on YouTube who decides to put out their garbage, we don't have to drive by with our truck and pick up the garbage. We're not the trash collectors. But sometimes that's what we do. We hang out on Instagram, we hang on whatever it is, and everybody put out garbage. So you have to be selective. You have to find this channel, because this channel is not feeding you garbage. We're feeding you the best of the best. Filet mignon, what is it called? Yeah, that's what we are serving over here. The finest, yeah, that's right. So but we do, and that creates a lot of clutter. Like he called it thorns, and we have to, like a gardener has to prune and clean out the thorns so things can grow correctly. So every day, if we want our soul to catch fire and to be able to really experience a godly experience and intimacy with God, we need to get rid of the stuff that is really weighing us down. And the excitement that we get excited about godliness shakes us up. It shakes it off. It's like a good dusting. So if you get dusty and you want to get the dust off, you can dance. You dance, you jump up and down, the dust falls off. So this is what you're doing. You're dancing. You're getting excited about holiness, and that shakes the dust off. Then you're ready for a deep meditation. And that's already in the blessings of the Shema. We learned last week there's two types of meditation. There is a meditation that is like the higher angels, and a meditation like the lower angels. The angels that burn up in God. In other words, they have a perception how God creates them, but how God is utterly transcending the creation. And that gives them such excitement that they want to get to know the transcendence of God. They yearn for that and they burn up in it. So we can have, sometimes in our prayer, we can experience that kind of an understanding in godliness. And then it's possible to have more of a lower form, which is the Ifanim, that these are angels that don't understand and comprehend, but they at least understand that there's something awesome. And they get very excited for that awesomeness, and they want that awesomeness to reveal itself to them. They're drawing it down. They call out, blessed is God from his place. Blessed meaning let him be drawn down into their world. So either or, there's an excitement that gets us, that connects us to godliness. We become attached. We're actually perceiving, understanding, and cleaving to God in the blessings of the Shema. However, that's called an external cleaving, because it's the meditation of the angels, which is the source of our animal consciousness, our lower consciousness. There's a much deeper meditation that happens when we say the Shema. When we say the Shema, then we're contemplating from our godly soul. Shema Yisrael. Here, Israel, that's the higher, that's the godly soul. And we're saying Havaya Elokeinu, we're contemplating the oneness of God on a much deeper level, how they're literally, God is the only reality. Not how he creates a world and he's bigger than the world or higher than the world that he creates. He is, and there's none but him. Everything is canceled in his light, to the point of he is absolutely, and only the soul really perceives this. But at this point of prayer, we're so deep that we can already engage our godly soul and open it up into our consciousness. That's what we were holding. He's going to take us another step in prayer. Then he's going to say how the prayer is limited and why Torah is necessary. We're going back to our Torah. And then then let's see where he's going to go with it. It's really interesting. I'm very hot, so I'm going to just turn on the air. I'm glad I'm able to turn on the air without worrying what's going to happen. In Lebanon, it's not exactly like that. People think twice before they turn on the air. Chaim alakul bracha. Yes. Here we are. The Inyanat Tefillah. Okay. Achakach. V'chol zeh hu ba'ashlivus. Here we are. Omnam. You'll find it somewhere in the I think towards the beginning of the new paragraph. Okay, on the page that I showed you. Omnam kol zehu inyan shel hasaga bilvad. All of this is only an understanding. Im seichel anushi. If it's the human intelligence, which means more the intelligence of the animal soul, like we discussed earlier, which is in the blessings of the Shema, or it's the divine intelligence, a much deeper intelligence. Ubenefashos, and in the souls, who asaga the nefesh bahamis, it's the understanding, the grasping of the animal soul, or asaga the nefesh elikis, or the grasping and the understanding of the godly soul. But this is only the nullification, that one can come to a nullification to God through the conviction of the mind. The conviction of the mind. Through understanding and intelligence. And shehu bitul hayesh, which although it can bring us to a great sense of abnegation to God, especially when we perceive the godly understanding that God is and there's none but Him, that He is the only reality, so much so that we become so mitigated and so small and so tiny and so humbled before Him. However, since it's coming from our understanding, meaning since it's our own mind that produced it, there will always remain an I feeling over there. Because why am I nullified? Because I understand. So you're still basing on self, and you're still feeling self. And what's bad about that? Nothing. It's just that you're not unified with the infinite, because you're retaining a self. These are all the steps of the ladder. The various different steps of prayer is a ladder, the Zohar says. So you go from consciousness to consciousness, deeper and deeper. Before you arrive, before you arrive to the top of the ladder, which is where it says that when Jacob had a dream, he saw the ladder standing on the ground, and the other end of the ladder reaches to heaven. So this is while you're on the earlier stages of the ladder, before you reach the highest rung of the ladder that touches heaven. But then there is a part of prayer that literally takes you into heaven itself. What does that mean? It takes you fully into the divine experience, where you can transcend yourself completely. Then comes the Amida prayer. Shmona Esrei means the 18 blessings, which is the peak of prayer, where we know when we say the Shmona Esrei, we say the Amida, we say it quietly, in a whisper. We stand motionless, and we ask God, please open my mouth. Which means, in other words, if God doesn't open the mouth, we couldn't speak. Why? Because we've become so lost. If we are really praying, if we're really there on that level, that one does not feel themselves to the point that you can't even talk. Made one stands like a servant in front of his master. This is a complete nullification. A complete nullification. What does that mean? So what does that mean? The kashem she'inyan atfilah. So he's gonna make a connection between the practical element of prayer and the mystical element of prayer. And he's going to show us how there is a parallel between them. The practical element of prayer on the simple level, halachically, and if someone doesn't study the deeper part of the Torah, just from a more simplest level of prayer, content of prayer is stand in front of God, ask Him everything you need. So in that sense, the prayer is very not a nullification of self. It's a humility, because you recognize that everything you need comes from God, but you very much feel yourself, you feel all your needs. And you're asking God to fulfill your needs. However, that's the simple meaning of prayer. The deeper meaning of prayer, on the mystic, is we're learning over here. It's the top of the ladder. One becomes so, one's consciousness becomes so high and so elevated and so, in other words, you enter into the inner world into the inner reality that you're seeing truth. And that God is the only reality. And it dissolves from beingness. Or what he says of it. So it seems like they're very different. This is very much about self. And this is very much the utter selflessness. But what here is an interesting connection. And I'm not going to get into now how these two things are both. If the body and the soul of prayer have to be connected, the halachic element of prayer, the practical element of prayer, that's the body of it. The mystical side of prayer, that's its soul. Soul and body are always matching each other. How can they be so different? That's a question, but that's not what we're dealing with right now. Dealing with right now is he's going to draw a certain parallel. Just like in the simple meaning of prayer, we find that prayer is meant, what's the objective? The objective is prayer is that God should respond to your prayers. And what are you asking him? Prayer means you're asking for change. That's the main commandment of prayer. When you need a change in your life, you should pray to God for it. For example, if a person is ill or a family member is ill, you should ask God for the healing. So you want a change in the status. Someone is poor or they're in a financial crisis. You're praying to God to assist you and take you out of that financial squeeze. So you're looking for a change. You're seeking for God to change something in this world. And so the objective of prayer is asking God, God will respond and change something. So just like in the regular prayer, prayer is all about changing a situation from being one thing, from being in a state of poverty to a state of satisfaction, from being in a state of illness to being in, should be Refuah Shalema. I'm blessed right now. The class should be L'Schus Chaim Shneir Zalman ben Leah Miriam needs a Refuah Shalema, a big Refuah Shalema, a big healing. So prayer is someone is ill and you're asking for a complete transformation. The person is walking around healthy and strong. So you're asking for a complete change. It's a radical change, hopefully. So just like it is, that's the intention in prayer, so it is spiritually, that the person has a radical change. Not the radical change in terms of what it affects, but that the prayer, the person engaged in prayer has a radical change. What's the radical change? From being a somebody to becoming completely one with the divine. For the duration of prayer, we don't exist as a creation anymore. The divine truth has so overtaken the person that right now you're not aware of any separateness. You're just like a conduit for godliness without any interruption of self. The self has been absorbed in God. So that's a change. So that's the parallel. Just like he says, prayer in the simple level is meant to create a change in the status. So too in the spiritual level, it's meant to create. See, till now, in the various different levels of climbing the ladder, fundamentally you didn't change. The person has been a somebody before, but before they started praying, they are an absolute ignorant somebody. The consciousness is completely ignorant. You start praying. I don't mean ignorant. You don't know anything, but you're not in touch with any truth today. Waking up in the morning and not being in touch with a higher truth is ignorance. So when you start praying, so now you're beginning to enlighten your consciousness. But essentially, and then you get excited, and then you become really enlightened and informed, and then you begin to yearn and attach yourself. But you're still you attaching yourself. So nothing, the essential fundamental self didn't change. Shmona Esrei comes, the Amida comes, and the idea of prayer is to affect the change, so it affects a change in the person who's praying, that they now cease to be a somebody and they're now just unified with God. That's the chidush, that's the novelty, and that's the peak of Shemona Esrei. It's the top of the ladder. Shemona Esrei being the 18 blessings, the Amida service. Just like the idea of tefillah is through prayer, things get drawn down into the physical. Just like in the blessing of healing the ill, the sick. And that God blesses the years, which is a blessing for livelihood. So the same as in avodah and service, the inyan tefillah, the concept of prayer, the person's existence has been changed. Which means that the person reaches a state of bittul b'mitzias, they become utterly nullified to God. However, now he's going to take us back to what we said earlier, that even the lofty state that someone is during Shemona Esrei, which is the peak of prayer, is still not the experience of ultimate truth. Why? Because it's the ladder that the person climbed. And if you're climbing, even if you're hopping onto the divine shelf, you climbed so high that you can hop onto the godly shelf. Since you climb there, it's still limited. It's only when God reveals himself in you because he is revealing himself, then it's limitless. And that's the element of Torah, as he's going to explain. In truth, in a gamma bittul b'mitzias Shemona Esrei, even when someone is in a state of absolute bittul of existence, Shemona Esrei, einoi bittul atzmi, it's not an essential bittul. Why? The key van shemagia lebittul zeh. In other words, it doesn't permeate your entire essence. It permeates your consciousness, but it doesn't permeate at the very essence of essence. Why? The kivan shemagia lebittul zeh. Since you've arrived to that level, since the way you got here was through taking the earlier steps, is a sign that whatever you're getting to is still connected to the earlier stages. Because if it would be a level that is utterly outside of what was before, so why do you need to take these steps? These steps aren't getting you any closer. If it's a complete change, a whole different reality. So what are you doing? And the earlier reality is incomparably removed from it. So why climbing this ladder is going to get you anywhere? The answer is, even when you are getting, the place that you're getting to has a certain relativity to where you were climbing from. Since everything before that comes in a manner of understanding, so even though Shemona Esrei is not your understanding, see the beauty of what he's saying is like this. At least what I think he's saying is that even when you're coming to the Shemona Esrei, it's divine input. It's divine input. That's that. Till now, it's our cognition of God. It's our imagination of what God is like and the unity of God, whatever we were meditating on. But when it comes to the Shemona Esrei, God is dropping something into your head. That's the reason. That's the idea of blessing. Blessing is download. So we're downloading the divine consciousness into. Till now, we are elevating our consciousness, and by Shemona Esrei, we're already downloading a divine revelation. However, he's saying, since the divine revelation is coming to you commensurate to the climb that you made, it's not the ultimate divine revelation. It's a limited divine revelation. And therefore, its transformation of the person is also limited. you are becoming transformed. That's why it's like prayer. Prayer affects a change. But it's not a core transformation. It's not an ultimate bittul. Like we said it earlier, the kivin shavoidus atfila, since the service of prayer is from the bottom up. So even when you reach the highest peak, one is still within the zone of somethingness, of a somebody that has become humbled. But there's still a self there on the subtlest and subtlest of levels. And the proof to that is, after we finish the Amida, we would think we're done. We're not. We still have to say Tachanun. After the Shmona Esrei, you still have to fall on your face, which is referring to what's called Tachanun, which are supplications, which we do right after the Amida. And the way it is done is that we put our head down on our hand like this. We sit down and we fall on our face. Now, the truth is that's a compromised form of doing it. The real Nefilas Apayim, which we were supposed to do, is to go flat down in a total bow, totally on the floor, flat on the face. But we're not allowed to do that because that level of what that expresses is a consciousness, is a state of existence so unified that we can't pretend to do that. And that's why the sages say that only real tzaddikim were able to do that. And that's why they canceled it for most people. So we do a imitation. We do an imitation of the Tachanun. The real Tachanun is Nefilas Apayim, fully flat on the ground, which means completely knocked out, nothing left of self. So the very fact that we do that after Shmona Esrei means that by Shmona Esrei we weren't fully there. This is the ultimate bittul. And you see it in the fact, in Shmona Esrei, we said before, you stand, you're not sitting, which shows on humility, you're standing. And we said you stand kind of motionless. You can chuckle a little bit, but really in concept, it's a motionless standing. You pray in silence, but you still have your head on top and your feet on the bottom. Which means there's still an indication that there is a superiority to the mind over the feet. That there is some sophistication, that there is something. Laying flat on the ground means I so don't exist. There's no difference between my skull and my heel on my foot. Because I'm not. All my brains and all my understanding is all nothing in front of your infinity. It's exactly the same like my toenail. That's the absolute nothingness. It's like you're going back to the modani which you woke up in the morning, he says. When you said, we're there too, you don't even know you have a head then. You don't know where your head is, where your feet are. You just woke up, you know nothing. But you're saying modani because you're not talking from your sophisticated self, you're talking from your essence. But the difference is, now that essence is permeating you. When you woke up in the morning, you're tapping that essence, but hasn't filtered into your consciousness. Now this is a state that's filtered. You're so consumed with the ultimate truth. So you'll say, hold it. That means by prayer. What did he just say? One of the proofs is that even by Shemona Esrei, you're not an ultimate bittul and you still need Torah, is because even after Shemona Esrei, we still fall on the ground. And we do the Nefilas Apayim, we do Tachanun. But hold it. If by Tachanun you get to that place, is a sign that prayer could take you to that place. Good, not Shemona Esrei, not by the Amida, but the next stage. So why don't we say that the ladder has, we always say the ladder has 4 rungs. The lowest rung is the blessings we say before prayer. The second rung is the verses of song. The third rung is the blessings of the Shema and the Shema. And then the fourth rung is Shemona Esrei. But according to this, there's a 5th rung, Tachana, falling flat. And if that's the case, then that's part of prayer. Why is he saying that no matter how high we go in prayer, there's always a little self? Well, by Tachana we get there. I don't know the answer. I'm just pointing this out. Obir Tamadavar. So I don't know. This needs investigation. Obir Tamadavar sheyeshnam beis darkei avoda. But now we start chapter 4. But what's the general reason then? Why do we need? According to what we're learning over here is Torah is one form of divine influence. As we said earlier, delivering ultimate divine truth. But it's not necessarily that we're connecting to it. Prayer is a form of how we feel to elevate our consciousness, which is relative, which changes, which we progress in, which we have to do bit by bit, as we learned. Fine. Why did God give us 2 ways of serving Him? Torah and Tefillah. Milmayla lamata, from up down, or milmata lamayla, from the bottom up. And this is what's so beautiful, because this we spoke about, I mentioned it already last week and the week before, is because a human being is made up of a body and a soul. And the body and the soul both require work. The body needs refinement. A body is thick, coarse, selfish, doesn't see past itself. So a work in the making, it's a construction zone, our bodies, our entire life. We live whatever the length of a person's life, hopefully we should live very, very long. The point over here is to refine our egos, to refine the thickness, the density of the body, to make the body into a mensch. That the body shouldn't only be thinking about its own selfish interest, but the body should devote itself to recognize something higher and deeper. What that really means is the body needs elevation. The body naturally gets pulled down by gravity. It's made up, the body is made up of earth, and it is attracted to earth. That's why we have the gravity that affects our bodies, pulling us down. And where does the body end up? In the earth. So the body is very much earthbound. And our work with the body is to make the body rise upward, to seek out spirituality, to seek out, to serve something beyond yourself. That's how you elevate your body, refine your body. Good. And for that we have prayer. But we also have a soul. And the soul is so holy, so godly, but the soul also needs discipline. Because the soul is undisciplined in its love for God. The soul is loving God even when God doesn't want the soul to love it so much. God says, keep away, leave me alone now. And the soul's like, leave me alone. It's like my son Zalmi calls me every day, makes me crazy. My beautiful son, he just went to yeshiva. And I say, Zalmi, I can't anymore. Zalmi, enough. You know my son, he likes to hawk. He wants to tell me and talk to me about everything. So the last 2 days after, I say, Zalmi, okay, you have to leave some for later. A little bit. So the soul, it just wants to run towards God the whole day long and melt in God. And God says, I need you to go back into the world and elevate the world. I need you to descend into the world and to purify the world. The soul doesn't want to do that. Soul wants to ignore the body and just and soar in heaven. So the soul needs to be grounded and the body needs to be uplifted. So Torah, which is God's word downward to the world, helps ground the soul. It gives the soul the nutrients or whatever it is, the power to descend. Prayer fuels the body with and is meant to elevate the body. Now, when the soul comes down and the body goes up, they have a beautiful place they can meet together in the middle. And you create a beautiful human being. That's kind of the idea that he's developing. The two types of service, Torah, Tefillah. Why? Because the avoda was given to a person. The service was given to a human being that is attached from a soul and a body. That's when we are called man. The human is called human when he or she is an entity of a body and a soul together. The soul is the nature of the soul is to always dissolve into non-existence. Soul senses the beauty of non-beingness. Doesn't want to be. It wants to lose itself in the infinite light above. It doesn't want. It wants to dissolve. As we say, the Ruach HaAdam, the spirit of man. There's a verse in Koheles. I gave up a long time ago how to say that word in English, so I'm going to leave it over here. I think I made a promise that I wasn't going to try to say that word again. Okay, so I'm not doing it. The Ruach HaAdam ha'oilo l'maylo, the spirit of man. I know what the word is, but I'm controlling myself. Now I know it, and I'm not saying it. The Ruach HaAdam ha'oilo, I don't know why they made such a crazy word. That's what bothers me. In any case, the Ruach HaAdam ha'oilo l'maylo, the spirit of man. So King Solomon says it in that book, Koheles. In Hebrew, I can say. In Koheles, he says the spirit of man is rising upwards and the spirit of the animal is going down. So the animal is referring to the body as well, not just to an animal. Humans have higher spirit. Humans have ambitions. They strive, even in the regular physical realm. Humans have had ideas, striving for a better world, striving for animals. They just know the instant gratification, the instant protection, the instant. So all they can think of is earth. Humans have vision. So that's the simple meaning. But the higher meaning is that the soul is constantly seeking to go up to heaven. Like we also say, doesn't say it here, but the human soul is compared to a flame of fire. Just like a candle, a lamp, the fire is always leaping forward. And if there's not something pulling the fire down, the fire would disappear. It would escape. So too the spirit of man is in a state of elevation all the time. And the body is naturally inclined to descending. What does descending mean? Descending means to go into a state of beingness. Defined, limited existence. It wants to live in the world of stuff, of things, and it wants to have things and give me things. And the more material it is, the more the body is happy. I mean, on a superficial level. The Ruach HaBehema, the spirit of the animal, is going always down. Tachlis HaKavana, and God put soul and body together that each one should teach the other one. We always think that it's only the soul that has to educate the body. The body has what to teach the soul as well. The tachlis, because really God transcends the spiritual and the physical. So the soul is very into the spiritual. and the body is very physical. And the unification that has to happen over here, the crossover needs to be that the soul needs to educate the body to ascend, and the body needs to educate the soul to descend, to come into vessels, to come into containers. This week we learn about it. When the person is spirited away, imagine this. The person is spirited away with an exciting spirit. They're a farmer. They have their new fruits, the 7 new fruits that Israel has been blessed. And the person his heart is swelling with gratitude. He runs into his farm. He sees the new fruits. He picks the fruits, and he's running off to the temple. He is so excited. His soul is on fire. He wants to come to the temple and sing to God all the praises, hallelujah, right? And as he comes in, the Kohen tells him, well, what are you doing? He says, I brought Bikurim. And the Kohen says, go back home. He says, why? You forgot to bring your basket. Got to put it in the basket. Without a basket, it's not acceptable. That means you have to ground things in the vessels. You have to have it down. With all the inspiration, you have to ask yourself, how will I live day to day tomorrow? How will I eat differently? How will I sleep differently? How will I walk differently? How will I talk differently? How will I think differently? How will I do business differently? How will I bring this inspiration into daily time and space living? That's your vessel. So the connection to God always has to be body and soul together. So the tachlis hakavana, and the ultimate intention is that the soul and the body need to become attached. V'hainu, and the way it works is that each one has to work against the ingrained nature that they have on their own. By the way, how do you know if you're serving God? Always. There's always a good litmus test. If you're doing what you don't want to do, then you know you're serving Him. If whatever you're doing is just exciting and exhilarating, I mean, you're supposed to have excitement. But if you really just are always doing what you want to do, it's not really serving God. That's why the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, and he brings from the Talmud, that every mitzvah you do, in order for it to have the true quality of godliness, you always have to push the envelope to where you're not comfortable. So if you're committed to come to this class and to learn, whether you're online or whatever, and you decided to come for an hour, you have to stay an hour and 10 minutes. Why? Because the last 10 minutes is when you don't want to, when you had enough. You've been, Chassidus is like drinking from the water, from the fountain. And everybody knows you drink, even if you're very thirsty. And then you drank enough water, and then you can't drink anymore. So you have to have one more cup to drink when you don't want to anymore, when you're already satiated. And the same is with charity. Everybody, you feel compassion. Everybody wants to feel that they're making a difference and they're being good, and they have this capacity to charity. But the real charity is to give enough that it hurts. It hurts you. You feel like, why am I giving so much? It's too much. That's charity. It's always to push it to a place where you don't want to anymore. That's where it is. And that's in general the rule. So when it comes to body and soul, it's also that way. You have to bend the body out of its comfort and push the body towards a more spiritual life by relinquishing some of our physical pleasures and not giving in to all the physical delights and wants that the body wants, and spending time doing with our body what God wants us to do, mitzvahs and the like, and holy things. On the other hand, when you experience very, very strong, powerful soul urges and desires from your neshama, and you want to completely run away from the environment that you're in, run away from friends and family because you're too spiritual. And God says, Why did I put you in that family? Why did I put you amongst those friends? Why are these your colleagues at work? Why are these it's because I want you to influence them. Say, well, they're not on the same level as me spiritually, so I never want to talk to them again. So God says, why did I send your soul into this world? I sent you in to influence, to channel your light, even if it means mitigating yourself. The soul doesn't like to mitigate. It likes to expand. You have to mitigate. You have to fit yourself into a vessel. You have to share. You have to inspire others. It's the opposite. Each one needs to do the opposite. Each one needs to go against its nature. The soul who is naturally an ascender, a ladder climber, an escapist. That's the nature of the soul. Should turn around and descend and flow downward. And the body, that usually likes to just slump itself in the couch and just lay like a dead thing on a couch, lazy, and doesn't want to really do much. So you have to yank it. You have to bring in a crane sometimes, excavator, whatever those machines are. Pick up that body and take it, drop it in shul, drop it in wherever it doesn't want to do. Here by Inyan Da'aliyah, it should have its elevation. That's why it was given to us two paths in service. From the bottom up, and from up down. Shem tefillah v'Torah, they are tefillah, prayer, and Torah study. Each one provide the proper exercise. It's in order to affect in the soul and in the body opposite their nature. The soul should the soul should descend and the body should rise. The Torah, which is a descending nature, it's the infinite wisdom of God concentrating itself into vessels. By the way, the word teneh, I like this. The word teneh, the Rebbe brings from the Megala Amukos, that the word teneh stands for the three letters Tamim, Nekudos, Oisiyos. Tamim means songs. Nekudos means dots, pronunciations, vowelizations. And Osios means letters. What does that mean? A basket are the letters of the Torah. If you look at any of the letters of the Torah, there's a letter. There is also vowelizations, like the Aleph. You can be Aleph with a chirik, and then it's E. It can be an Aleph with a cholam, then it's O, and there's an Aleph with a patach, which is A, or O, right? Comments. So this is the different. And then there is also a song. If you listen to the one who reads the Torah, they sing it with a certain song. Each word has its right note. The Torah is a song, God's song. But God transcends the song. He transcends the Torah, transcends the songs, the energy of the Torah, transcends the songs, transcends the vowelizations, and definitely transcends the letters. So the Torah forces itself to come down into the letters and into the song and into it. And that's because the Samta Batena, you got to put it in the basket. It's descending. And that's why the ultimate humility is the Torah. It humbles itself to come down. And especially there is the Torah as it is in heaven, speaking about the loftiest, most abstract things. And then that very same Torah comes down and encloses itself in the do's and don'ts of everyday life, in governing and ruling the most minute little things in daily life. This is the descent of Torah into this world. So when we study Torah, the same effect happens to our soul. It humbles the soul and helps the soul come down into vessels. And prayer does the opposite. Since prayer is all about expansivity, expanding our consciousness, elevating ourselves, in a sense, removing ourselves from the physical material world, lifting ourselves out of the vessels and rising upward into the spiritual, into the godly, into the abstract. Well, one affects the body, the other affects the soul. Now, since Torah and Tefillah are like the soul and body, Torah is like the soul, descending downward. Prayer is like the body that needs to ascend upward. So just like in Torah and in Tefillah, which means in Torah and in prayer, one cannot substitute the other. Everybody knows in Judaism that one is obligated to learn Torah and one is obligated to pray. And it doesn't work if you claim you just belong to one of these modes. I pray, I'm a prayer, I never learn Torah. Or someone says, I only study Torah, I don't have time for prayer. It's not halachically okay. Even the biggest Torah scholar must stop his learning when it comes time to prayer and must pray. There were exceptions, but those exceptions don't even exist today anymore. Everybody must pray. And on the other hand, everybody must study Torah. So you have to have both, as he's going to explain. And one cannot take the place of the other. As Chazal say, he's going to prove that. That the one of the rabbis, one of the sages of the Talmud, witnessed a certain sage or certain people that were praying very lengthily. They spent a lot of time in prayer. And that was not allowing them to study Torah. So this rabbi, when he watched these people, he said, oh, what a shame that these people are forsaking eternal life and they are occupying themselves in temporary life. They're engaged in life because prayer is connection to God. But prayer is considered temporary life in compared to Torah, which is life of eternity. Based on what we learned earlier, we understand, because Torah is the absolute. Torah is utterly divine, so it's infinite. Prayer is our perceptions of the divine, our refinement, so even though you're connecting, but what are you connecting to? A very limited godliness, and that's called chayesha. It's called temporary life. But you see from the Talmud that the Talmud was not happy. You see from the Gemara that the Gemara was not happy. That the Gemara was not happy with people that will study Torah and will not, the people who study Torah and do not pray. I'm sorry, the opposite. People who pray who don't study Torah is no good. And then on the other hand, we find Sha'ab bin Yamin Haya Mispalel. So there was a sage, his name was Abba bin Yamin, and he would pray that his prayer should be next to his bed. It's interesting. He prayed that he should pray. What does that mean? What does it mean his prayer should be next to his bed? That means that he should wake up in the morning, and the first thing he should do, he should pray. And I guess it was a real challenge for him, because I guess he loved learning. And because he loved learning, his first thing would be, when he wakes up in the morning, to immerse himself in Torah study. And he had to pray to God to give him the strength to hold back in learning Torah until he can pray first, and then he would study Torah. So this emphasizes that what? Here you have a person who is so in love with Torah, and that's all he wants to do, and he himself recognizes that that's not correct, and he's asking God for assistance to restrain his love for Torah and do his prayer. his prayer was that his Torah study should be Ya'acharat Tefillah Dafka, should be after he prays. So what do you see from here? On both sides of the coins, he proved that Torah without prayer isn't good, like Abba Binyamin, who prayed that he should be able to pray first. And prayer without Torah isn't good, like the people who were criticized because they were praying so long and they left very little time for Torah, and that they're forsaking what's more important. So you see that one cannot take the place of the other. Both of them are necessary. Now, since prayer and Torah are both body and soul, so that teaches us that the same applies also to our body and our soul, that to live a life that God wants us to live, it needs to be a fusion of body and soul. Just like if we're living an utterly physical existence, we can all understand it doesn't fulfill a divine purpose. If we ignore our soul completely and shut it down, it does not serve a divine purpose. But as we live just a pure hedonistic, animalistic life. What is that? Materialistic existence. It doesn't have any meaning, right? We will understand that. In the same way, if our lives are completely soul and there's no body there, which means we don't pay attention to refine the body, we neglect the body. We run away from the body. Our soul doesn't busy itself with fixing the body, but rather running away from the body. That even though the soul is occupied with whatever is so holy, but it's not really paying attention to the body, that too does not fulfill the purpose of the human being. And it's a missed opportunity. One did not fulfill the reason for their soul coming into the body. In the service of the soul and the body. They need to be properly balanced. The chemistry needs to be well. This idea that the soul, this energy of the soul, that the soul is generally a flying being that wants to soar upward. Yes, one has to activate that flying element. Yes, one needs to enable the soul to but whenever one does that, there always has to be an element of grounding to it. Every time we take a flight, we always have to think beforehand, how are we going to ground this experience? Very important. How is this going to change my daily, everyday experience? You can trip out from time to time, but you got to ask yourself, where is that going to lead me in the service? And the body that is always in a state of descent. And the body needs to have a lift. And this needs to be, in other words, meaning it's possible that one does both, but not properly integrated. There has to be a really, really correct integration. And he's going to explain how you can have situations where soul and body are not really working together. Even if there is work done on both ends, but they're not in unison. So let's see how he explains it. At times there can be there are times that it happens to a person that they can contemplate godliness, and they can get very excited. And one can get very excited. One can learn Chassidus and get extremely excited. Mitzad HaNeshama, which is obviously an indication that they have sometimes, you really realize that you have a soul. Because you see that you're getting really excited about the godly. If we only had a body, we would get excited only about the physical. We get excited about the godliness because we have a soul that is craving and yearning for the spiritual. But here's what happens. Sometimes you can experience very intense excitement, but afterwards, that means just a short lapse of time, and the person, there's no trace and memory at all of that lofty connection. And the person becomes literally like, God forbid, like an animal. They've completely lost their selves. And they got to wonder, like, how in the world, what happened to me? Where is all that light? And we'll see in a moment. And at times, afilu b'shas ma'isa, lo yachol is gaber al taivas aguf. And a lot of times, a person can be in a spiritual state of elevation. On a spiritual state, you're really inspired spiritually, and you're feeling the spiritual energy like really moving you with excitement. You studied something, learned it, or felt something intense. But at the very same time, the body also gets provoked by something that is appealing to the body. And the person knows this is not healthy for me, this is not right, this is not good. And yet but they can't control their physical urge or their physical desire. Even at the time that they've just been living in this powerful spiritual experience. So that really looks like an oxymoron. That really looks like someone who's totally like a little schizophrenic or bipolar. You're like, where are you? That's such a contradiction. And one might therefore conclude that their spiritual excitement wasn't real. Because if there would be any truth to it, any real to it, how is it that a minute later, or even like I'm still in the middle of the spiritual experience, and here I'm being dragged down by a piece of sushi? Come on. I know I like sushi. Fine. It looks like it's good sushi. But come on. I'm in such a high state now. Right now, I can't control that urge. Nothing's going to happen. I'll have sushi another time. No, I must have it now. Person can't control their urges. I'm using sushi as an example. It could be anything. How is it from such a high that you have no self-control? So you come to the conclusion and say that it was all fake. The high was not excitement, was not an excitement. And the Rebbe says, no, absolutely not. It was a very real excitement. Problem is that there were two parts of you that got excited about two different things. You have two beings inside of you, each one facing in a complete different direction. The soul saw strawberries for the soul. The body saw strawberries for the body. And each one is running to their basket of strawberries. And the two are not communicating. Because you never worked on harmonizing the two. The two have never locked together. They don't discuss things together. You have two personalities living in your body that have never sat down and discussed and seen how is it that we kind of, how is it that we harmonize? So the soul is and he's going to say there are people that have very, very high souls. And a lot of times God puts a very, very high soul in a very, very, very coarse body. Because a very coarse body needs a high soul to be able to lift it up. But if the person fails to connect the soul to the body, then the soul takes a flight and the body stays behind. So it would be like the famous story in that Chassidus speaks about the train that's sitting on the tracks, and it's late already, and the people are getting impatient. Everybody's there, and finally, the smoke, like they used to have the steam trains, and the smoke starts bellowing up, a bunch of smoke, and everybody's excited. We're going, and the train goes, and everybody's there. And all the wagons are there and all the cars And what happened was the locomotive, the power engine, the conductor or the train, whatever, failed to attach the chain. So the locomotive went off, and everybody else stayed on the the whole rest of the train that was supposed to be pulled along stayed back. So we have to always make sure in our lives, and this takes work, it takes focus, and it takes mindfulness to figure out how to attach the excitements of the soul. When the soul flies up, it takes the lower consciousness of the person along with it. And your person can do it. You know how you do it? You always think to yourself immediately when you're going to experience. You're thinking like you say to yourself predetermined before you even pray or before you even study, and say, right now I'm not feeling a way to curb my desires and appetites, but as soon as I will get in and I'll feel the pleasure in the godly, I will refrain from doing so and so. This material habit, I will hold back from it for a day, for an hour. I will curb my whatever. So you're teaching your body and your animal self to go along with your soul. But if you don't do that and you just allow the excitement to shoot off and it's not communicating, the body remains what the body is. It never was educated. It was never disciplined. It was never refined. So the soul goes and the body is left behind. The animal stays an animal, and the soul is an angelic being, and there's no, as he says. And it's sometimes, he says, sometimes it can be, the soul is experiencing such clarity of the divine, and the body is falling into sin at the same time. The Tamadavar, and the reason for that is the excitement about God is completely taking place in the soul, in the spirit. And it does not have any connection to the body. Therefore, when the body has a taiva means a desire, or sometimes a lust, the soul cannot control it. Obviously, to master and control the body takes exercise. You have to start with small little things. You can't control everything at once. Start with small little bits of self-control. And when the more refined you get, you have to take a little bite out of one's material enmeshment. The more one grows in the spiritual, one must minimize a little bit the material physical. Like this, the body becomes more seasoned with the soul. And he says, when this is particularly hard, this dichotomy, this situation where soul and body are not communicating, it's by people, and this is so interesting, it's by people who have very high souls. It's precisely the people who have enormous spiritual capacity that because of that, their bodies are not able to synchronize with the soul. So they remain a little bit, and specifically, if it's a very high neshama, if it's a very high soul, and vahagufu gaspi yoiser, and the body is very coarse. Now the Talmud tells us an interesting thing. The Talmud says, "Lefum gamla shichna." It's such a beautiful phrase. According to the camel is the load. Take a look at a camel. The camel's got like really, really broad bones and a really gesunte back, like really this. You load them up with a bigger load. A camel that's, whatever, wobbly, it's not whatever, you give him a smaller load. So God, when he measures up, when he has the most powerful soul, he finds a body. He finds a body that's a hot-blooded body, and he matches them up. When that happens, that's not always the case. When you have cases like that, very high souls and very coarse bodies, these people can either become the biggest tzaddikim, the most righteous people, because they harness their body and they immediately get a hold of their body, work hard. Sometimes they have to fight like crazy, but they do overpower and they do latch the body to the soul and work on the refinement, and then they reach places that are unimaginable. But if for whatever reason the person has not been trained to do so, or they're lazy, or whatever it is, these people suffer tremendously because they live in both worlds and they can't handle it. Because on the one hand, they have very intense spiritual experiences, but then they have to deal with guilt and shame from the most coarsest and the most despicable things because they can't fix it. Their body keeps on becoming more coarse, more spoiled, more dragged into darkness, and their souls are and there's no connection. This is very, 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 very pitiful state. Then it's possible it's possible that soul and body should not be attached. Move on, and it's understood this is not at all in accordance to God's intention. The intention that God had when He created us, lifral, to effect, as we spoke earlier, the soul should. Now here's the thing. In order to fix a body, a lot of times the reason why the person doesn't fix is not just because they're not disciplining. It's because their soul doesn't want to discipline itself to mitigate the spiritual lights and excitements to things that are closer to the body. It's really interesting. The soul wants to read books that are too lofty for the body to relate to, because the soul is just gobbling up because it's such a powerful soul. But these are such lofty ideas. They're so far, they're so abstract, and they're not close enough to communicate with the body. So Chassidus says always that when we meditate, that a person has to force themselves to curb their very loftiness and to meditate on things that are closer to the human experience, so that the physical and earthy side of the person can also appreciate it and get excited about it and get moved by it. But the soul, as we said, the soul needs to have humility to do that. And when the soul is just being, likes just the ecstasy and the excitement, it's not good. As he says, the soul needs to be in a state of hamshacha, in a state of descending, the yerida and descend. Opposite its nature. But when the soul does not humble itself and make a connection to the body, this is not according to God's intention. And the same is also, this is so important. This is basically telling us that beautiful spiritual experiences, which we think are because they're spiritual, are so good, they might be nice to you, but if it's not filling God's purpose, then it's meaningless. There needs to be the fulfillment. What does God want? And the same is also true. Now he gives a more of a complicated concept, something a little harder to understand, like why this isn't good. He says like this: you sometimes have a soul that is very, very high. Here you have a situation where you have a very lofty soul and a very soft body, a very refined, not refined, but delicate body. The body's delicate, and therefore it's not naturally heated up with passions and desires. The body is very much a very unsensitive body to the pleasures of life. Doesn't need things. That's how you have to meet people that way. It's not always because a person worked on themselves. Some people naturally, they're not hungry for power. They're not hungry for money. They're not hungry for, they live simple, and things don't turn them on. And even if they turn them on a little bit. They're not, it means their bodies are made up of, for whatever reason, from a less, their blood is a little cooler. It's not such hot blood, to put it that way. And these people, okay, so when they have a soul experience, we would think these are the people who don't sin 5 minutes after they've been with their eye. These people are not sinning 5 minutes after Yom Kippur. These guys, are sustainable. But your question over here is, this seems to be really great. Their soul is high. Their body is not making so much trouble. Everything is great. But in truth, this too is not a very good mix. Why? Since they, to begin with, have been given a very, very delicate body, so the body naturally is very easily provoked towards spirituality and holiness. And the body kind of can sense godliness without the soul. So the body, by its very nature, it's like sometimes people fear God very much. I don't mean fear and fear of punishment, but they have a very strong sense of a divine authority, and they don't step out of line. They keep all the mitzvahs. They're very, very obedient. And you don't necessarily see them meditating so much and coming to state of love of God. It's almost like by nature. They're in sync with the Torah and with the mitzvahs, with the law. Very, very, very much just from, they were always that way. When they were little kids, parents, they went along with their parents, whatever their parents taught them, went to school, never got in trouble. When they grow up, they very much, so what happens is, and it's not like just by rote, they feel God. What he's saying is, they never really opened up their soul. They're just cruising. They're on kind of almost like an autopilot. On their own, they're on autopilot, or what is it called when you set your car? Cruise control. You set it up, it's on its own. So their body follows God's will. So what's the problem? They're doing Hashem's will. Now, obviously, if they have the capacity for so much more, but they're getting away with superficial service because they don't need to activate their soul too much, because they're basically looking at their lives. They're seeing they're doing everything holy and everything godly. Now, had they really put work in, deep meditation, they would have opened up their bodies to much, much loftier experiences, to much deeper connections, because they don't have so much interference with the body and they don't have to overcome ugly temptations. They're free. They're unburdened from all these. They don't have the heavy weights. So to them, their soul can really take them on a very high flight. But they don't do it. Why? Because they suffice with just their natural love to God that is without work. And that's what he's saying. He's drawn after godliness on his own. It's not the soul's work. The soul is not pulling the body, because the body is kind of gets pulled along, goes along with the divine flow on its own. The person doesn't need the service of the soul. That should affect the person, that he should be drawn to godliness. Because he's by nature, he or she by nature is a fine body. V'haneshama hi gavaya, especially since they also have a high neshama. Ein tzarich lavay de klal. They don't have to do any work. V'nasa b'miyad rotzeh l'lukus. Automatically, when something godly is taking place, when there's a mitzvah available, they're there. But they didn't work hard for it. So this person has a real problem. It's almost a bigger problem than the other guy. Because the other guy at least sees himself slipping and falling, and he has to eventually, he or she can't handle the rift that exists in their life. It's very hard to live a life where your soul is very lofty and your body is very dark. So eventually you realize the problem. But people who are kind of cruising their way through Judaism, through their lives, and doing always what's right, and there's no work, they don't even realize there's a problem. And they're kind of satisfied with themselves. Because when the body is coarse, then you need hard work of the soul. If you have a coarse body, there's a whole lot of hard work to change that body's direction. Right? It's like working with the inner city kid. You got to really, really have a good teacher who can turn this kid around, because they grew up in the hood and they have bad negative influences, and they don't have good parenting, and they have so much drugs all over and all kinds of stuff going around. And to be able to educate a kid like that needs a really, really strong and educator, and someone who can take kids like this and direct their lives to the right thing. And how do you do that? In terms of your own self, through internal contemplation. What he means when he says internal contemplation, he means that the contemplation should be things that the body can understand, as opposed to very lofty contemplations, which are called more makif, which the body doesn't relate to. And then the body remains disconnected and the soul flies, and that's no good. That affects the body, that should be drawn to godliness. But when the body is very thin or very, very, very delicate. Now, even the most refined body needs some kind of an awakening of the soul, because the body is still a body. But it's very minimal. The moment the soul stirs a tiny bit, the body is already coming along. It's only a little awakening. And people like this get an arousal and excitement towards holiness, but it comes through a very brief, quick, and superficial contemplation. Don't have to internalize deeply. Just give them anything. They're immediately excited, and their body is on par, and they're already doing so many good things. But the work itself, so, and therefore he says, but the service itself, the body is being is self-motivating itself. Because it's a fine body. It's interesting. He says we're dealing with a person who the body immediately gets to see godliness in everything. Even in the matters of the world. There are people who, because they're made up of less dark material, to them, it's natural to see Hashem everywhere. So they speak of Hashem all the time. They're seeing godliness everywhere. Every moment that comes out of their mouth, they're always talking about Hashgacha Pratis. But it's not coming through hard work. It's almost like the world is around them is not translucent, but not transparent, but translucent. It's like vaguely they can see a lot. They always see divine providence, but it didn't come through work. That's the problem. It did not come through the work of the soul. This is not according to the intention. So these people can argue and say, but what do you want? It's not my fault that I was given such a light body. Not a heavyweight body, such a light body. The moment the soul gets a little stir, the body is already jumping. So what's my fault? The answer is you're given such opportunity. So you must set for yourself much higher standards and much higher, greater achievements. And you can do it what others can't. So do it. Scale the really high mountains. Go for it. But if you're satisfied with just kind of being average, no good. The intention is that the soul should be the one that is affecting the body. Opposite the nature of the body. The body is naturally pulling downward. The soul should turn the body around, that it should draw after the body, opposite its nature. It's like the conversion of darkness to light. But when the soul is high and the body is also pretty high, then the soul is not uplifting the body. The soul is only triggering. The soul only acts as an igniter. That's all. The soul just has to create the spark, and the body is already burning on its own. Which the body now should be drawn naturally. So that's the premise over here. The premise is there always has to be going against your nature. That's why it's not according to the intention. Now he's going to give us a third scenario. Now this situation is a real bummer. This is a situation when the soul is very poor, very low soul, vagufu gas, and a very, very heavy, thick body. Somehow someone mismatched the two. Must have been some not such good, some messed up parents over here who managed to get a very coarse soul with a coarse body. Poor guy, right? This person has got a very sluggish body, very, very, even for a tzaddik, it would be hard, for a high soul, it would be hard to drag this body up, let alone for a poor soul. Then the soul is not able. The soul tries, it ratchets up its engine. It puts the pedal to the metal. Sometimes you watch I don't know what that gauge is on the car that shows you how much it happens to me when I try to overtake cars on the freeway. You see me giving classes, but on the freeway, I'm a monster. I'm going because I'm from New York and I can't stand the Los Angeles drivers. No one knows how to drive over here. All right, so always on a rush. So especially when it doesn't happen over here, I don't do it. So, but when I am going in the country roads, or when you're going up out of the Kaddish, and you have a Shlomazel car who's taking his time for whatever, and it's a two-way road, and you have to find the part where you finally, because there's no passing lane, and finally you have like a 30-second passing lane where you got the dots, and you're behind this person already for a half an hour. So then you're kind of worried because you don't want to get caught on the other side of the car in a two-way highway. So then you got to push that thing down all the way and watch the thing go all the way to the red and get ahead, especially if you don't have the best car, right? If you have So this poor guy is like really, really, really ratcheting up his soul, trying the hardest they can, but they can't lift the body. The body's just too coarse. It doesn't budge. Then the soul is not capable to elevate it. It doesn't have the ability to lift this up. Opposite its nature. Now, where do we have this? Ukamoi. He finds a parallel in halacha. There are certain wicks and certain oils that you don't light them. You don't use them for Shabbos candles. Because the oil is a very murky, thick oil. It doesn't burn well. And the wick sometimes is a bad material, so it doesn't catch on fire. So this is an example for souls and bodies the body is the wick and the soul is the oil is murky and the body is meaning the soul is pretty dense and the body is also very innocent, it doesn't catch on fire. And that can happen because sometimes you have wicks that if you burn them, they burn out immediately. They can't provide a sustainable fire. They burn out immediately. I think there's remember I was trying when I was reading this 2 weeks ago. I really got stuck over here. Either because it seems like he says the same thing twice. So I'm not sure if the person. Truth is, let me look at your version, because maybe in that version, since you have a few words that are different, maybe in that version it's corrected. 142. Oh, this is back here. I need the next page. 143. Is there a 143? Maybe I just don't have it. Yeah, I think I left it there. No, it's not there. Oh, it's interesting. It's a different wording over here, and he skips this whole thing. It's interesting, but the lashon over here is a little hard. That either it's not a keli at all, gets burnt up completely in the light. Oi, seems to be the same. Or I think it's supposed to be either they're not vessels and they don't catch on the fire at all, or the opposite, it gets burned too quickly in the fire. That's what makes sense. But the wording over here is a little interesting. Move on, and from this it's understood. So the emesis in this case, the other cases you can say that it's the person's fault. You have a high soul, work hard to pick up, even if you have a coarse body. There is a way. If you have such a high soul, if you have only the humility and patience, you're going to be able to fix even the coarse body. The person who's got the high soul and the fine body, as we spoke earlier, their problem is that they're cruising, so they can also fix it. Don't accept average. Go for much deeper. Go for much higher. You have the ability. But this guy seems to be a person who can't do anything. It almost fits that there's a misfit on God's end, on the one who put the soul and body together. And I don't have an explanation. I don't know, because the Rebbe doesn't explain what the situation over here is. It's almost like just a state that could happen. It seems like it could happen. And then maybe a person like that has to seek out the help of others. Maybe that's the way it is. That they need to connect themselves to tzaddikim and others who can empower, who can add horsepower. They themselves don't have enough horsepower in their soul, but they can maybe hook up with others who can infuse them with the horsepower that is necessary to even lift their bodies up, possibly. But again, the mimer over here is very short, so it's not really telling us. But from this it's understood the general gist of the idea we get. That soul and body need to be well matched and well meziga. Meziga means well mixed. The soul should be in equivalence to the body. And God helps us create the right chemistry. Like he says, I guess what he was saying before is that it is a possibility, but in general, God is the one who provides that these things shouldn't happen. And that's why he says, in general, in our days today, right before the coming of Mashiach, the time before the redemption, we know in general we're the souls from the bottom of the barrel. In the end of times, there's the last souls. They're from the feet of Adam Arishon. They're from the bottom of his feet, as opposed to the earlier generations who had far more powerful souls. What he says is interesting is that we have less coarse bodies. Hashem has, so when sometimes you wonder about the early generations, and the sages sometimes refer to and tell us stories about that they sinned, and they're like, and you wonder, how can such great people? They had monstrous bodies. Like their capacity for desire and passion was like off the charts. But they had equivalent off the charts souls that they were able to work with it. Our bodies are toned down. With a little bit of work, the bodies fall into line. It's really interesting. Now in our times when the souls are lower, neshama is the b'chinas hakvayim. These are the souls of the heels. Ozay hagufim and bedakas yoser. So Hashem has provided that the bodies are a little bit more refined. Edeler, they're more refined. It's in order to acclimate the soul and the body that they should be they should be, commensurate one with the other. They should be compatible with each other. And through that, the person's service can be. Now, of course, God does the general conditioning, and then we are expected to do the rest of the work, to bring the fire down and to lift the wick up. The fire and the wick should connect. And that each one should be able to work opposite its nature. And when you're working opposite your nature, you're touching the divine. Because God is beyond all nature. Everything has nature, but God is beyond. Why is it so important to go beyond your nature? And the answer is, that's where you meet God. God doesn't have a nature. He's above all nature. So when we transcend our nature, that's where we make the connection. So now we come to the last chapter, and we're it's not actually here. There's 2 more chapters, but short. Just like this is in the general service, which means this whole situation where you have a sometimes overpowerful soul and all this possibilities of misalignment between the soul and the body, and he's teaching you that it has to be in the right manner. The same is within our service itself. When it comes to high holidays, when it comes to the month of Elul, and it comes to the time of Teshuva, we have to be aware that we need that doing Teshuva and experiencing holy feelings and excitements and powerful moments of yearning and connection might make us feel good, but if they're not done with mindfulness, and it's not done with a plan, and it's not done with a target of then it too can be a as we said, a wasted teshuva. You can rapture your soul, but it won't connect to your body. So there needs to be a bezigana. Now, for that, God gives us in the month of Elul, Torah and Tefillah, which help the two connect. That's the 2 types of roses, Aroa b'Shoshanim. You get to hear how we're rounding up back to the beginning of the mind. Just like it is in our general service, which means in our general state of existence. So it is in the service of Teshuva. The Afsha Klolos in Yana Teshuva. Even though generally the experience of Teshuva is one of rapture, it's one of allowing the soul to like break out of its limitations and constraints. It's freeing yourself up and giving the soul the ability to soar into the spiritual heights. But you have to take along the body. That's what he's going to say. It has to be you must connect it to the physical material world. That means that one must bring their spiritual experiences into their material life, that the material life should be done with more divine sensitivity. The physical things that we do as a human being in our physical life should be done with elevated consciousness and not in an animalistic way. So one needs to have a refinement in their life. Don't be satisfied with a very intense, powerful sobbing of the soul when you're doing tshuva, that you're connecting to God and you're satisfied, wow, it felt so good to be so close. Immediately think and bring it down. That's why it says in Chassidus that immediately from Yom Kippur we go to Sukkot. Sukkot is a very, very physical holiday. What do we do in a sukkah? We eat and drink, we eat and drink, and eat and drink, and eat and drink after the sukkah. It's a very physical holiday. But the whole point is to bring God into that experience, so that when you're eating and drinking the rest of the year or living your material life, it's done with a heightened sense of refinement, of spirituality, without the lust, without the coarseness. V'hainu shekasher is baininus the tshuva, when one's contemplation of tshuva, when a person does tshuva in a way, shemargish she'inyanim agashmiyim, it's possible he's going to show us how we can have a unhealthy tshuva. So when a person has a sense of tshuva, of return to God, but the person feels that no, I'm sorry. Okay. When a person is feeling the return, the connection to this to spirituality, to godliness, and you feel that your material, that one's over obsession and in general one's material physical existence and physical life is an hindrance and interference to the soul and to its connection to God, the conclusion is not allowed to be, number one, the conclusion can't be, okay, now I feel good because I'm connecting and then I don't care what's going to be further in my life. That's for sure not a good conclusion. But the conclusion can't either be, I'm shutting myself. Everything in my material physical life is just being shut down. I'm becoming an ecstatic, what is it called? An aesthetic. I think that's not aesthetics. No, it's I forgot the word. I'm becoming I'm going to remove myself completely. I don't want anything to do anymore. I'm shutting down my material. I'm shutting down my physical company. Who ba'ofen shemargish is in a manner she'inyanim agashmi in the physical things. Who befrat in yanim afechen, especially things that are not just physical, but things that are opposite of holiness. And one is supposed to feel that way. You feel that this is an interference of Torah study and mitzvah observance. So he says you have to be very careful. The right path in our service is not allowed to be in a manner of escaping, to run away from the material world, but rather it's easier to do that. It's harder to learn how to discipline yourself in the material things in your life to do them with higher intention. The intention is that one should affect one's material existence, that it should not interfere in my Torah and in the mitzvahs. In order to do that, you got to do the material things in a restrained manner, in a refined manner, and put in effort to stop every time before you're going to do something physical, whatever it is in your material life, and think about the godly nature of what you're doing. What is the godliness of it? And if you just do that, then the physical will not be the same. And the same is also true. He's showing it on two ends. When you're seeing the lowliness of the materialistic life, don't escape it. Figure out how to pick it up, because that's what God wants. On the other hand, when you're having a moment of divine ecstasy and bliss, you're looking upward and you're seeing something enormously exciting. Make sure that before you start climbing, you're thinking, how will I climb up there and bring something down? Not just get swept away by the what is it word? Euphoria, or what's the word? I don't know. I'm losing all the words today. Euphoria. Not to just get lost by the euphoria of the tingling sensations of that spiritual experience. It's not in a manner that you're racing towards it and neglecting your everyday life. But rather, the service is that in the physical itself, you should feel the godly in the material. And in order that our awakening, we're going to go through an awakening over the next 20, 30 days. We're going to experience a real deepening of our soul. It's going to happen. We go through the high holiday experience. You're going to experience it. And the Mimer is telling us that we have to be mindful as we enter, that it needs to be done in the right way. Don't run away from the material world, but rather you should feel the godliness in a cup of coffee. You should feel the godliness in everything that you do. And therefore, we say Chasidus, it should be Gashmius, it shouldn't be Chumrius. Chumrius means coarse. Gashmius means physical. This is only when you can acclimate neshama and guf together. They should be one commensurate the other, and they should be attached one to the other. Keniskaliel, as we said before. And this is what concludes the discourse. I am to my beloved is to me, Haraya b'Sheshanim, the one who shepherds amongst the roses. The Inyan Haraya b'Sheshanim, as we said earlier, the idea that he shepherds, grazes amongst the roses. This is the assistance we get from above, like we discussed. Which means that even though that our general service of Teshuva, and the service of the month of Elul, is our work, we still need God's assistance to help that it should be successful. That's the point. In order that our service should end up being appropriate, we need to have a good harmony of soul and body. They need to be well acclimated, well integrated. God assists us in it. It's a beautiful assistance that we get. Genau. וזה אני לדוידי ודוידי ירויה בששנים. שבכדי שתהיה avoided אני לדוידי ודוידי לי. In order that there should be the service of I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me, that our service of repentance should be done appropriately. It's through Hashem grazing us with the roses, the two types of roses. Prayer is called roses because it's the 13 attributes of mercy, the 13 petals of the rose. And Torah is called roses because there are 13 methods in which the Torah is studied. And Shoshonim, which means to learn Mishnah and learn Halach. So through learning Mishnah and through saying Tehillim, you got the proper spiritual integration and assistance that when we will, Be'ezras Hashem, experience powerful and beautiful moments of tshuva, it should lead us into a more of a fulfillment of God's purpose in our life. Which is the proper balance. That's why we call the class a balanced tshuva. A proper balance in our tshuva. This gives the right koach, la'avoda, to the service. That I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. The two of them should be done really right. And with this, we conclude this very beautiful and special discourse. May we all be blessed with a happy, healthy, good new year.